Hello and welcome. I'm Tim, and this is TimBatSea. And I've said in the past many different things on the tugboats we have to change out on time or hours, whether they need it or not. And the wire is no different. The wire that we tow barges with has to get changed. Different companies and different regulations have different things that tell you when we have to do different things. And the first thing we have to do is take the wire off. So here we are in the shipyard, and they have an apparatus. As you can see, the men on the dock are spooling up the old wire. This is like about, I think we have like 2,250 feet or something like that of old wire. And before a wire times out, it's not uncommon to end the wire. A lot of times we'll have a lot of wire on the drum, but we only use the first half of it. So by flipping it over, you can put the first half on the bottom where you don't use it and use the second half. But in this case, this wire, although it looks fine, didn't really get that much use because we don't do a lot of towing. It's time for this wire to go and do something else with it and put a new wire on. So the first thing they have to do is take it off, and obviously they don't just want to coil it up somewhere, so they put it on an old spool. So as these guys have, they have this machine with a electric motor that runs a hydraulic pump, and they pull it off under tension so that they can have it nice and tight on the drum. Anybody who's ever been fishing knows that if you don't do things right when you're casting a rod, your whole line can look like a bird's nest when you get done. Obviously that's something that you don't want to do with about 6 tons of wire. So they're winding the old one off, and they don't just pull it off. This is actually, I'm in the doghouse spooling it out to them. Something that's a little different on our boat than most of the boats that I've been on is that we don't have what we call an automatic level line. Now, a level line is this thing where you'll see 2 cylinders that go up and down that put the wire where it's supposed to be on the drum on the winch. Usually those are timed and they move back and forth according to the size of the wire. And for one reason or another, the winch that we have here has a manual level line, so not only am I paying the wire out to match the speed of them winding it onto their drum, but I'm also having to move the level line to make sure that it comes off in the right way too. So as I mentioned before, in this case, we're changing out the wire because it's time to do that, so we do it on time. But there are other reasons why you change out a wire. We look for things when we inspect the wire. We look for things that we call fish hooks, and that's where one of the outer casing will, one strand will break off and make almost like a fish hook. And whenever we see that, we know that that's something that has to be cut off. Now hang on, I'll come back to this in a second right here, but in this case right here, we've wound all the old wire off, and while they're taking the old drum away and bringing the new one over, it's a good time for my engineer and the AB to go around and do some regular maintenance on the winch. He's greasing things right now. That guy right there with the white hard hat is somebody from the shipyard, and what he's doing right now is replacing the clamp at the end of the, you can't really see it from this angle, but the wire is still attached to the drum of the winch, and there's a big clamp on there, and he is undoing the clamp, and then they'll pull the wire right out. But like I said, in the meantime, the engineer goes over there and greases everything up and does everything he can. Now I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're getting the old wire, if that's the new wire or the old wire. I don't know. I think that's the old wire. But anyway, I was telling you before that sometimes if the end of the wire gets, the part that you're using has some noticeable damage on the outside or anything's wrong with it, instead of replacing a whole drum of wire, sometimes it's not uncommon to take 150 feet off of the wire or wherever it is where the bad spot is, cut it off, and they do something called pouring a new socket. And the socket is the end there. You'll see that at the end of this new drum that they're putting on, you'll see a new socket come on. And it's done in a really kind of cool way. That would make, if we ever pour a new socket on here, I hope to film that to show you guys, because it's kind of cool what they do. These wire specialist guys come in, they cut the wire, they put it through the end of the socket, and then they use some big metal fids to open the wire up, kind of splay it all out, and then they get it right exactly in the socket the way they want it, with all the wires splayed out, and they make an epoxy that they pour in there, and they let it harden up, and as you pull on the wire, it would try to compress that epoxy, and it makes it so that it can't come out. It's extremely, I've never heard of anyone, I've heard of wires breaking, I've heard all kinds of things that have happened, but I've never heard of a wire pulling out of the socket. I'm sure it's happened, but I've never heard of it. And so that's how the socket is poured. But when we get the wire from the wire company, it comes on a spool, and the socket is all the way on the front side of it. Right now, this is just the bitter end of the wire, and they're going to pass it through the level line and then bring it back to where that clamp is. You can see in the lower left-hand spot there. They'll stick it through, and they put this clamp on there. And just to give you an idea, some people say, what happens if, a question I get often is, what happens if the barge sinks? Will it tow you down and sink the tugboat? And I suppose that could be possible, but in reality, we have so much wire that the barge would have to be in over, almost a quarter of a mile of water to sink before we'd be at the end of the wire on the drum. So in other words, we could keep paying it out, and if the barge landed on the bottom, it would basically act as a big anchor or mooring for us at that point, unless you were over 2,500 feet. So we do have things on board. We have a acetylene torch and grinders and stuff like that we could cut the wire if we had to. Or because most of the towing force of the wire is a result of the wire going against the drum, it's not that big a deal. That little clamp basically holds the wire in place. And I think the idea, although I've never tried this, and I hope I never have to, the idea is that if you had to pay all the wire out, by the time you got to that little clamp that's holding it there wouldn't be any friction on the drum, and it would probably slip right past that clamp, and that would be the end of that. But hopefully we'll never do that. So now you can see they're getting it all set. We're putting it in here. And hang on a second. While I was talking, I wasn't really paying attention. I should have told you, in order for us to put the wire on, we need to put it on while it's under strain. And if you go back a couple minutes, you'll see they hook up this sled. It's a couple pieces of steel that sandwiches the wire to give it resistance as we're pulling it on to the boat. So the wire comes off the roll, it goes onto the back deck, and you can see where they have anchored off to the for the two shivs there. They'll have this sled that kind of clamps down on everything and gives us resistance, and it's real important to try to get it as tight as we can onto the drum as we're rolling it on. As I've mentioned in other videos, many of the things that we do or the safety measures that we take, we've stolen from the airline industry, and the airlines industry has figured out that it's better to replace things before they go bad than to have airplanes drop out of the sky. Well, we probably think the same thing about boats too, that I'd rather replace a wire before it gets to the end of its life and we're towing up and down the beach, and that would be a real bad thing. So in this case, we know there's some people that measure the life of a wire in you can do it in how old it is and how many miles you tow on it. One of the problems with wires is that most of the damage happens on the inside, that you can't really tell. The outside will look fine unless you have a problem where it connects with the bottom, it contacts the bottom, and then you get something called a fish hook that we were talking about before. Now you see right now they're disassembling that sled, and they're taking that off because the bitter end is right there, and they've got a socket, and that about does it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Now you've seen us put a new wire on. You guys stay safe, and as always, I'll see you on the one.